Okay, so today we are joined by Valerie Alexander. We're going to talk about happiness. She is an American author, speaker, screenwriter, and director. Wow, what doesn't she do? She is also a writer for the Huffington Post. Her books include Happiness as a Second Language, a guidebook to achieving lasting permanent happiness, also Success as a Second Language, a guidebook for defining and achieving personal success. Prior to becoming a writer, director, and author, Valerie was also into corporate securities lawyer and an investment banker and an internet executive in Silicon Valley. Valerie, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. Happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. So very interesting what you do. In the West, we're actually in a post-war age where society is more equal than it's ever been before. Both famine and disease are at record lows, and living standards are or have increased immeasurably. This is a massive contrast to, say, 50 years ago. But that said,
Right.
would you say that people are happier today than they were 50 years ago?
It depends on the group of people. There's people who have advanced greatly. You look at a lot of the countries that were developing over the last 50 years. You look at the levels of capitalism that have reached China. You look at the advancement in economies in South America. Yes, the happiness has increased in those areas. If you look at places where they had the pretty much highest standard of happiness, which would have been the US and the West, the overall happiness has decreased. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of things that people now have more time on their hands, which is very interesting that as technology advanced and gave us more leisure time, it actually gave us more time to stop and contemplate, what is this all about? What do I do with my life? How do I fill my days if I'm not plowing a field and then going home and sewing the clothes and all of that?
Wow, so
And
down to
so,
purpose, huh?
I'm sorry.
Down to purpose.
You need something to fill your time, and it needs to be an accomplishment that matters. I talk at companies, I give talks at companies called Happiness in the Workplace. And it's based on, there's all kinds of happiness workplace studies. Gallup does one, the Harvard Business School, University of California at Riverside. And they all have reached the exact same conclusion, which is the number one happiness we get from our jobs is our sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
As long as you're achieving something, you're happy.
Well, it's interesting what you say about the shift in happiness from a global perspective. I mean, according to the Happy Planet Index, people in the USA are among the least happy in the world, along with, to name but a few, the South Africans and Russians. So I can see why they might be more unhappy given the state of affairs.
Right.
But in contrast, Norway measured up as being one of the happiest countries, along with Mexico and Colombia. So with no correlation of happiness between the economic development of the country and the happiness levels, why do you suppose that is? Purpose again?
Interestingly enough, you look at the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Sweden and Denmark, they always score very high in happiness. And I will share with you, there is a base level that I can't remember the name of the researcher. He refers to it as the hygiene of life. And the hygiene of your life is having your basics covered. So there's a roof over your head, there's food in your belly. You're able to access medical care when you're sick. There is a base level of happiness achieved when that stress is eliminated. So a lot of countries with really strong social programs where there is, I will say nationalized medicine, where you don't have to worry about losing your home if you get cancer. Those kinds of things contribute greatly to the baseline happiness of a country. And then I think it has a lot to do with also the wants. Having unmet wants makes you really unhappy. And you and I earlier were discussing social media.
Correct. Yes.
The challenge I see to happiness with social media is what you see on social media is everybody's highlight reel. And what you live in your own life is your behind the scenes movie. And so when I just had an amazing trip. I spoke at a conference on Martha's Vineyard called Relentless MV. It was one of the best conference speaking experiences I've ever had in my life. My husband got to come with me, which normally doesn't happen. We had 5 glorious days on the East Coast, 3 of which I was being paid a lot to be there, and in Martha's Vineyard, which is beautiful. I got home and I wasn't even home a week, and I was looking at people's Facebook feeds of their trips. My sister went to Montreal, friends of mine are in Paris, and for whatever reason, it made me a little bummed, a little disappointed. I was thinking, why don't I get to go to Montreal? Why don't I get to go to Paris? Which is ridiculous. I just got back from an amazing trip.
Oh, it's true.
That kind of little psyche infiltration can't help but bring us away from our happiness. I think there are now, again, many studies on the fact that people are happier when they step away from social media, because social media invites a level of comparison, and comparison is the enemy to happiness.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a real tendency for people to really kind of share their best filtered, preened and prepped versions of themselves, all having a wonderful time and how life is great, and they don't share the arguments or the kind of red eyes at 6 a.m. when they go on that early morning flight on holiday, or the hangovers in the morning. And it's a very one-dimensional view of people, and I think it's an unattainable lifestyle where people are sitting back at home looking at other people having a wonderful time and how life is great, and wondering, why aren't I part of this? And there's, I guess, a feeling of self-doubt that comes into it as well. For that reason, I find that social media can be a bit of a curse as well as a blessing. And there's also that kind of like social expectation that you're going to be posting all the time on social media, and if you're not, my goodness, what's wrong?
Right. Or if I used to do happiness coaching, and I had which I don't anymore. It's just it doesn't make sense in terms of time, of the value of the time I'd spent on it versus the value of my time speaking or doing other things. But when I was coaching, I had a client who had 4 children. She was very wealthy, and all 4 of her children were doing well in life. And one day, one of her children, Mother's Day, her daughter had to call her and say, don't go on Facebook today, because everybody on Facebook was going on and on about how amazing their mothers were. And 3 of her 4 children weren't on Facebook. And her daughter, who told her, don't go on Facebook today, because she knew if she went on Facebook, she would see all these other children posting about how amazing their mothers were, and she would go crazy.
Oh, and you kind of wonder how many of those people posting up on Facebook are actually with their mothers. That's the joke.
Or on a much more somber note, a member of our family has a son who is severely mentally ill. And for her, seeing everybody else's post on Facebook about their child graduating from high school, their child getting their first job, their child's ballet recital, whatever it is, she doesn't get to experience any of that as a mother. And Facebook is a daily source of pain for her. She finally just couldn't even do it anymore. And so these are the kind of things we also have to think about in terms of our happiness in a global sense, what is affecting our happiness. But I want to talk about like people being happy, because we actually also have more reasons than ever in life to be happy.
Absolutely. I mean, famine is at a record low. I mean, it's the most peaceful time in the world as well. There are fewer wars than there ever have been. But I mean, would you say that happiness arises from a lack of unhappiness? Or do you think it comes as a result of something else? The feeling of purpose, like you said earlier.
It is definitely requires acknowledgement of what is good. It is not just an absence of unhappiness, because, like I said, I know people who are incredibly wealthy and have everything they ever want in the world, and they're miserable and unhappy. And I know people who are like single parents living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 kids, and they're happy people. So you can be a happy person. The reason the book is called Happiness as a Second Language is because it comes from a place where if you grew up in a house where everybody spoke Greek, you would speak Greek.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but if you grew up in a house where nobody spoke Greek, you wouldn't expect yourself to wake up one day and just start speaking Greek.
So it's infectious, is that what you're saying? You're the net result of the people you're around.
It is also how you were raised. I know people who were raised being told that happiness isn't for them. Happiness is for fancy people.
Wow.
We're concerned with feeding ourselves. We don't worry about being happy.
Such a limiting belief, a negative programming, if you like.
Yes, and that is something we are capable of overcoming. Here is the beautiful thing right now. There is brain science research about happiness, which is just fantastic. It's advancing in the greatest way. There's a study center at Berkeley. My graduate degrees and my law degrees are from Berkeley, and they have a study center there called the Greater Good Science Center. I encourage everyone to look into it. They have these free MOOCs, massive online courses of happiness. And the science behind it is showing we have control over this. You actually have control over how happy you are. We can reprogram the neural pathways in our brains. Here's the interesting thing about our brains. If I have a thought growing up, or if I'm told something growing up over and over, if I'm told, oh, you're not that pretty. If every day somebody said to me, you're not that pretty, you're not that pretty. That synapse, am I pretty? No, I'm not pretty, in my head, going back and forth, would actually get smoother and faster every time that message got reinforced. And literally, our brains form those pathways and they get a little deeper each time. So we create ruts in our brain. We actually have a little rut in the brain over any pathway. But so that's why if someone is stuck in a rut, literally, their brain has formed a little rut of negativity. And you can't overcome that by thinking, if someone always told you you're so dumb or you're not good at this. If you think, I'm so dumb, like, oh no, I'm not dumb. By the time you think, oh no, I'm not dumb, your pathway's already been reinforced. But if you wake up every morning and tell yourself, I'm good at what I do, or I'm great at this job, or they're lucky they have me, and you just tell yourself that over and over and over, you will start forming new pathways. And I have so many people say to me, I would feel like an idiot saying I'm great at my job every day. And my response to that is, well, get over it. Because you don't have to say it out loud, and you don't go around saying it to other people, but say it to yourself every day until that becomes the neural pathway over which your synapses naturally fire.
So positive affirmations in terms of manifesting the better situation that you know you can have. I mean, I met a guy actually a long time ago. Actually, he took it to new levels based on what you're saying. And say if he had a shower, he would thank the shower. Say if he had a glass of clean water, he would thank the tap. And I just thought, okay, this is interesting. But I guess that is a way of programming your way, or affirming the belief that we're very lucky in the world and we've got a lot to be happy about. Moving on, there is this old adage that success is a choice. Would you say, based on what we're saying here, that happiness is to a large extent a choice too?
100%. Again, let's go back to that situation where I said there's that concept of the hygiene of life, having all your bills paid, being able to feed your children. I'm not about to sit here and say, God forbid, if you're in a migrant caravan trying to escape warlords in your country and you're being shut out of another country, or your children are being taken away from you when you enter the border of another country, and believe me, that is a direct criticism of the United States right now. And I am embarrassed by the way my country is treating these migrants. But if you're in that situation, I'm not about to say to you, oh, you can choose to be happy.
That's the thing. I was going to ask you about that.
That's so unacceptable to say that. But if you are in a situation where your life isn't threatened and you're fed every day and you have a bed to sleep in, you 100% can choose to be happy. You can. And it's funny, your friend with the thanking the shower. I start every day by making a list of 5 things that are making me happy that day. And sometimes it's that there's hot water in my house. That is such an unbelievable advantage in life, for hot water to be in your house. I am astounded that people don't thank God every day for that.
Yeah. It's very true, and it's very easy to take things for granted when you're used to a base level of health, or you're in a very fortunate situation. And I mean, I completely hear what you say about it being very hard to coerce happiness if, say, for example, the person isn't financially stable or in a harsh
Right.
situation emotionally. Maybe they have depression. You can't say someone who's got severe depression to be happy. I mean, that could be the most
Yeah.
offensive thing to them, actually.
Yeah, no, depression is an entirely different, it is an actual chemical. Again, that we know so much more about the brain science. Depression is a chemical reaction in the brain. I had a person that came to me for happiness consulting and coaching, and after the first session, I said to her, I think you actually need to speak to a professional. So she spoke to a professional. She called me back and she said, I hope you don't mind. I'm going on antidepressants. And I was like, hope I don't mind. I said, what?
Oh no.
If you told me you had diabetes, I would tell you to take insulin. And I'm not saying medication is the answer, but the reason it gets stigmatized so badly is that people just don't understand and they want to judge. And it's the worst thing we can do. The worst thing you can do to somebody who has depression is judge them for having depression.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, you talk a lot about happiness in the workspace or the workplace. My
Mhm.
question to you with this is, can one remain happy in pursuit of goals? Or do you sometimes or often find that the overambition to fulfill often overambitious goals is often the source of unhappiness, say in corporate life?
Well, it depends on who set the goals. If you are setting your own goals and you're in pursuit of them and you can make progress on that, you're going to be happy. Now, if you've set the goal, I don't know, be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you are sitting in your couch every day playing, Fortnite, you are not going to reach that goal, and that will make you unhappy. But if you break your big goals down into small goals, break your small goals down into daily tasks, and achieve something every day,
Very good,
one,
yeah.
yeah, then you are going to be happy. Again, the Harvard Business School and UC Riverside and Gallup all say that sense of accomplishment is what makes us happy every day. And I want to go back to the happiness in the workplace and the importance of it, particularly for your listeners, for traders. Traders should be paying attention to how happy a workforce is at a company they're investing in, because companies, just in America where we're studying it, but I know that the stat applies worldwide, but just in America, companies lose 550 billion with a B, $1 billion a year isolating for workplace unhappiness. Your unhappy workforce is more likely to quit. They're more likely to give bad customer service. They're more likely to be absent. They're more likely to steal. They're more likely to trade your corporate secrets to your competitor. They're
Yes.
more like, no, this is not, these are actual studied results. They're more likely to have workers' compensation claims. They're more likely to be injured on the job. They're more likely to cause injury to other people. Right now, the average tenure for a new hire at Google is 14 months.
Goodness, that
Think
is
about
not good. That is
think
really
about the
surprising.
incredible expense of that. Not because people, when they think about recruiting, replacing a lost employee, we're also not including in the bottom line all the costs of that. It's not just the advertising for that person or the recruiting headhunter cost you pay. It is all the lost productivity of the people who have to interview that person. It's all the lost productivity of that position until that person becomes up to speed. And then if you've built a corporate culture where people aren't rewarded for good work, where they aren't given any autonomy, where they aren't given a sense of accomplishment for what they're contributing to your workplace every day, and they're not given a sense of purpose, those people aren't going to stay because work is going to make them miserable. And there's no excuse for it. Right now, when I do this speaking at companies about their workplace happiness, I have a whole section I call accidental managers. We put people in charge of other people without giving them any training in how to speak to other people. And that costs us so much money. A simple 1 hour session on how to speak to the people who work for you could save a company 2 quit employees and 10 days of absence from every other employee.
Wow, so these are the hidden costs, and it doesn't take much to kind of solve these hidden costs at all from what you were saying.
Very little.
That's incredible, actually. Hopefully there'll be a number of CEOs listening or business owners. We'll have to find out.
Then I'm going to give one quick tip to everyone who listens.
Actually,
and this
please do.
This is from my talks. Whenever you're communicating with an employee, especially if you're prioritizing a task, assigning them a task or prioritizing a task, lead with appreciation. Always start with, hey, thanks for what you're working on, or thanks for the good work you're doing. Then give them clear directions. I need you to go to this building and meet with Bob and let that person know what our next 4 steps in our contract are. Give clear directions. And then express confidence. Say, I know you can handle this. Because people give us what we expect of them. When you expect excellence, people give you excellence. If you expect loyalty, they give you loyalty. If you expect dishonesty, they give you dishonesty. So people give you what you expect of them. So I always say, lead with appreciation, follow it with clear direction, and then express confidence in their ability to do the job. Now, those are a lot of steps. People are like, how am I ever going to remember those steps? And what I say is rock your workforce with AC/DC. Appreciation, clear direction, and confidence in their abilities.
So there we go. Almost a little bit like a compliment sandwich, I've heard it called.
Yes.
So what process would you recommend, very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but
yes.
What process would you recommend to people who have made the conscious decision to have more happiness, to accept more happiness and be more happy in their lives?
Have a happiness practice. And there are some techniques you can pick up. You can find things all over the internet. You can get the book Happiness as a Second Language. But most importantly, tell yourself you're a happy person. Mean it. Just tell yourself, when you're in those most challenging situations, when you're late to pick up your daughter from school and the person in front of you in line is taking 2 hours to count their change, just stop and say, I'm a happy person, because that will take all the stress out of that situation. Tell yourself you're a happy person. At any given moment in your day, stop and count 5 things that are making you happy in that moment. You know, I'm happy that my car has gas in it. I'm happy that my daughter's school isn't going to make her wait on the curb if I'm not there in time. Come up with 5 things that make you happy in that moment. And by the way, some of my things are, I'm happy I breathe without a respirator.
Oh, great.
Because,
yeah, that's
yeah, exactly. But that's very important. And then the biggest thing I will tell you, and it's a secret that people don't discuss very often, is that one of the greatest ways to ensure you have a happy life is to make sure there's happiness around you. And that doesn't mean sacrifice your own happiness for someone else's. If your happiness is in conflict with theirs, work it out. But don't be the toxic person in a relationship. Don't be the toxic person in a workplace. Do you know what? When I'm having a bad day, I will actively look for strangers to give compliments to.
Oh, very good. Yeah, adding value.
Yeah. Make other people happy, and you'll be amazed at how much that increases your own happiness.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, in cities, it's very impersonal. The number of people are confined in a very small space, and people naturally shut down. But if you do, and I sometimes do that myself, if you engage with a complete stranger, it often makes their day.
Completely. And there is one more thing I want to add. I used to do this. I'd see some woman who was just beautiful and say, "Oh, you were so beautiful." Now I actively look for the person who isn't told she's beautiful. Or the man who isn't told, that jacket looks great on you. Look for that person and give them the random compliment.
Very good. So all about adding value when you're out and about, and you'll undoubtedly feed off their elevated sense of state as well.
Yes.
Fantastic, Valerie. Well, thank you so much for your time. Just very quickly before you go, where can people find out more about you and what you do?
My website is Speak Happiness. So Speak, S-P-E-A-K, speakhappiness.com. It's undergoing a renovation right now, but definitely go to there. You'll learn about my work as a speaker and as an author. And I love working with companies. I love working with conferences. I also do a lot of work on the advancement of women and on unconscious bias in workplaces. And it's all based on brain science. So I really hope that people start focusing on these things, on the diversity in their workplace, on the happiness in their workplace, because it 100% affects the bottom line. It 100% affects the value of your company. There are all kinds of research on this. And so when people want to get ready to make more money as a company by having a happy workforce or having a gender diverse workforce or eliminating the bias in their workforce, please come to speakhappiness.com and find me.
Fantastic. So that's speakhappiness.com. The link is at the bottom of the article. Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. Pleasure to speak to you.
Sure, Robert. Have a great day.